Hey peeps, it's confession time. I actually filmed this with my machine slightly out of the frame. Now, I actually didn't think it mattered. I promise you that if you're here to tackle a double welt pocket, you will be able to do the sewing part. Most of the learning here is about how to position things and understanding all the different steps. When I say that I'm going to sew something, it's basically a straight line, so I am not too worried. And towards the end, I actually did refilm it, so there's some juicy sewing action at the end. Okay, over and out. Let's get to this. I'm going to talk you through how to do a double welt pocket, but I'm going to be using the cast trousers as my base. And if you are or have done the sew along, or if you've done the cast trousers from Make by TFS, the method they use is different to what I'm going to show you in this video. I think this is a simplified way of getting the same result. It gives you a much greater range in terms of like the thickness of the fabric you're using. It's less reliant on keep monitoring that all the measurements are adding up. I'm going to show you exactly what I mean. So here we have a double welt pocket. You can recognize it because it's got that double lip. And on the other side, I've got a fully lined pocket. So again, ideal for trousers or any garment that is not going to be lined because you get a really, really clean result. So let's get straight to the pieces that you will need. What I've got here is the back of some trousers, and I've already constructed my darts. And in this example, you will see that the dart ends, within the pocket. So they're already sewn. And on the back of the trousers, what I've done is I placed a strip of interfacing, which will reinforce the opening of your pocket. I did it based, if you have the pattern, I did it based on the template that is given into the sew along tutorial. The original pattern for the cast trousers comes with a pattern piece like this, which is narrow, and that is a pattern piece for the welt, and you are meant to cut two of them, which are then going to be folded in half and both sewn onto the trousers. So for the method I'm going to show you, all you have to do is, instead of cutting two of those, is you want to use it as a template for the width, okay, but make it much deeper. Now, I was working with offcut, and this is kind of the widest I could go, and I've got 8 centimeters, but to be honest, I would have gone up to maybe 11. I think that would have given me a little bit more room for the facing. Now this is becoming your 2-in-1 welt piece, okay? And I have interfaced it, and I've also finished one edge on the overlocker. So you could do that with a zigzag. The other one you can leave because it's going to get sandwiched within stitches and we'll never get access to it. The reason why I think it's good to make it actually even wider than I did, so I did 8, I suggest maybe you go for 11. It's because the bottom welt in this technique act as a bit of a facing as well. And you can see on mine, I've done my top stitching and contrasting, and I didn't change the bobbin thread, so it's pink. I like the heather color on this side, but not sure about this. But you can see that this is going to act as an extra facing. So this is why we wanted to finish it with a zigzag, so you won't really see it, but it's accessible. But also if it was a little bit deeper, my buttonhole wouldn't have kind of been slightly half ajar on it. So this is why I think deeper is better. The top welt will not be affected because when you're top stitching here, you're going to close it. So it doesn't matter. And this is why we're going to leave the top of that piece untouched. Now I've gone ahead and prepared all the lining piece, and if you want to see how that's done, it's in the other welt pocket video that I've got, and you can go straight to just like marking and sewing this bit. But essentially, if you're not doing the cast trousers and you're just here for the technique, what you have is a long rectangle. I've got it's probably 55 centimeter long, and it's 18 centimeter wide.
So this pattern piece is going to be basically folded over, you see, and because it corresponds to the same area as the dart on the trousers, we have darts exactly in the same place. So you can see that I have prepared my darts. And I need to tell you that, I mean, on this fabric, right and wrong is not obvious, so that's quite handy. But if you had an obvious right and wrong, your darts excess, so the bit sticking out after you've done the dart, needs to be on the right side of the fabric. So it's the, you know, it's kind of unusual because usually you have them on the wrong side. So this is just a little thing to remember. The last piece that's already again prepared on my pocket lining is this, what they call the pocket bearer. I would call it a facing, probably just the English variation.
Quick intervention, I thought this required a little bit more detail. So what the pocket facing does is that it's the first thing that you will see when you open the pocket. So it actually gets sewn onto the second half of your pocket lining. And it is strategically placed right behind the welt opening. So it basically avoids having the contrasting lining showing first thing and having the self fabric instead.
The pocket facing is just below the dart, and I have overlocked one side, and it's just both sides are top stitch. So one side remain raw, just like the top welt, it's not going to be accessible. And then one side is just overlocked, just easy, don't want to add any extra bulk, and top stitched in place. So now we're ready to start the process of the welt, starting with marking it. What I've marked is the center of the dart, is where we're going to cut, but it's the overall width. So if you look at this drawing, basically what I've marked is that middle slash line, but I've gone all the way to the end of the window, okay? And I just want you to also notice how those darts finish right on the slash line. So when you do your darts, make sure you reduce the stitch length at the end so they're nice and secure, just in case, you know, things could start unraveling a little bit. Okay, so once I have this, what I like to do is to do some stay stitching either side of the pocket opening to stop it from potentially fraying. The success of a good welt pocket is in the confidence to go and cut really close in order to let the fabric turn properly, and extra stay stitching is going to give you that extra confidence that your fabric isn't going to fray. We're working with an opening of 1.2 centimeters, 12 millimeters if you like. So since this is my middle line, I'm going to stay stitch 6 millimeter away from it. I'm going to pivot, do a little triangle, and then come back that way, okay? And I'm going to do this on both sides. A stay stitching is a small stitch, so I'm going to go for 1.5, and let's see. Okay, it's white on white, barely visible, but basically I've just sewn around, okay, here and at the other end, okay? Now, we're going to work from the right side of the trousers, and we are going to start sewing the double welt. Now, you're going to take your double welt pocket piece, 2-in-1, and 2-in-1 is always good news, isn't it? So we're going to be centering this piece right side against right side on the trousers like that. So I've just put a little pin here, which is the middle of the opening here. I know you can barely see this, but it's roughly around at 6.25 or something. And I'm going to center it. Now it doesn't have to be absolutely precise. This is why I like this technique, because we're just going to sew the window and then we'll sort out the welt post sewing. It's kind of breaking down the steps. So to center this, what I can do is I can just fold my piece in half like this and have it sort of align with that pin, yeah? And then I'm trying to be also like centered here. That's fine, okay? And then I'm just going to do this. That's it. And I trust this is centered because I had my pin, and that really should be enough. Make sure this is well pinned and, you know, nice and flat, because we've got the darts in the way, not in the way, you know. Okay, so this is our welt in place, and now I'm going to sew it. I'm going to sew it from the wrong side because I can use my stay stitching as a form of marking, and also I've got my center line which I can use as a guide. And what we're going to do is sew from one end to the other, you know, in a straight line, nice and parallel with our center line. And then I'm going to hop onto the other side and do one end to the other. What we're not going to do is sew the full window. We're not going to go to the side here. We're just going to do two parallel line of stitching. The last thing you did was a stay stitch, so make sure you put your stitch length back up. So this is the pocket opening stitch basically. Now we're going to be adding the lining. Once you've done this a few times, you will be able to merge those two steps. You will be able to just do your lining at the same time. But I just wanted to break it down because, you know, there's a lot of information in welt pocket making. What we're going to do is you want to put the side that's got the dart excess side down, like this, and notice how the pocket bearer, okay, so we're here. So pocket bearer is here, dart excess is out, and I'm going to put them both against the right side of my trousers. I'm on the right side of the trousers. I know, again, it may not look like it because we've got this, but I'm on the right side of the trousers. So technically, we are right side against right side. Get on with the program. And what I'm going to do, okay, I'm going to put the hem just because it's easy, I've got it handy here. But what I want is, again, this lining to be super nice and flat against the rest of the trousers. You could just like use your darts as a way of matching it. And I'm putting some pins kind of either side. Again, though, I will be sewing this from the wrong side. Okay, so I'm just going to literally follow what I've just done. And you can see how everything kind of stemmed from the original kind of marking here, but also those little stay stitching, which kind of was the way of marking the rest of the pocket, as well as securing the edges. Okay, so now the next step is to cut the opening. We're going to be cutting through the trousers, the welt piece and the lining. So you could just do this in stages. You don't have to like try and do all the layers at once, but the main thing is not to cut anything else in the way. So this might be all right. Now when you're cutting, you're not going to go all the way till the end. You're going to stop about, you know, a good centimeter before, and then you're going to head towards the corner. Here you want to cut really quite close to those stay stitching. And you can see I kept all the pins on the back because it really kind of saves having to worry as well about fabric corners of the pockets getting caught in the excitement. We're going to take this to the ironing board and basically turn the whole pocket lining and welt piece on the other side of the trousers. And this is going to take a lot of pressing to get it to sit happily. the first thing that you might want to try and do is to really kind of open this as a rectangular opening to get clean corners here, okay? So I'm just going to spend a little bit of time pressing it open. So what you might find useful is to open your seams a little bit first, and then I'm pressing the lining away, so just kind of like really giving everything a good press. And then I'm doing the other side, which I haven't pressed yet. That side is a bit harder because you've got the kind of the bulk of the dart. Okay, then pressing the lining away. Trying to get rid of any little lines like this. And then, making that window as, nice of a corner as you can. I'm going to check it on the other side as well, actually, before we go ahead. Let's check it on the other side. This is going to be sorted with a bit of steam. Okay, so now what we want to do is to manipulate what's left of our piece into the two welt, okay? So what we're going to do is to fold it back. Can you see how I would have benefited from having something a little bit wider? But we knew that. I was really using up the last piece of material, so that's okay. But essentially what's going to happen is here you're going to have a bit of a, folding malarkey, and that's okay as long as you kept to the pressing along the way. It should be quite a tidy finish. But essentially you're now forming your welt, and you want them to be as equal and well divided as possible, okay? Okay, so once you've created your welt, we have a couple of things to do. The first one being we need to attach the leftover piece of the welt onto the lining so they're not flapping around. So once you have pressed it, go ahead and put some pins as, whilst it's like this on the lining, because when we're going to sew it, we're going to leave the lining away. And it'll be harder to get a good sense of where that needs to be. So whilst you've got it all pressed flat, go and pin those in place, okay? And now we're going to sew them, so only on the lining piece, okay? So like this, to the machine, no trousers in the way, and then we'll do the same to the lining, not on the trousers. Okay, so these are now attached, and I'm not too worried about the way it looks here again because, as I said, it's going to get all sandwiched, so we're all good. And now what I want to do is to secure the little triangle. So that means basically what you're doing is we're going to be sewing the side of your pocket, but we do it internally. So we're going to leave out the trousers, and you're going to sew along the triangle here. Your next step is going to go and finish the edge of the seam of your pocket. So we're talking about the lower side, and you want to single out, so you want to remove the lining, you want to remove the leg, and you're going to do a zigzag along here. So now that you've done your zigzag, there's a couple of steps which are optional, but we need to make sure that we do them before we finish the pocket by bagging it all up. So your next big step will be to bring the lining up, essentially. We're going to do this by bagging it, but essentially we're going to bring the second part of the pocket. Now that means that if we want to do our buttonhole on here, we need to make sure that we don't have the lining caught. So this is why this is now the time to do two things. You can do a top stitching line on the bottom edge of the pocket, okay, but again that's optional, you don't have to. So if you're planning to have it fully top stitched, then now is the time to do the bottom part and only the bottom part. And then if you wanted to have a buttonhole here, then this is the time to also do that. So I'm going to do it. I've used this like heather contrasting thread, which I quite like with the canvas. It's not very forgiving though. And it's not a proper top stitching thread, okay, but that's what I had for now. So I'm just using this cotton, but go ahead and, you know, feel free to put a top stitching thread on if you want for this part. So I want to be nice and close. I got to be careful because the last thing I did was a zigzag, so okay, so I've done my bottom stop stitch, and now I'm going to do a buttonhole going vertically like that in the middle of my pocket. So for me, the middle will be something like 6 to 5, so yeah, somewhere along here. And I'm just going to change everything for the buttonhole. I've just finished my buttonhole. It's a little wider than I wanted, but that machine that I use, I couldn't fine-tune the width of the buttonhole. Anyway, the main thing is that we got those steps out of the way whilst our pocket lining was not up. So you can see that basically we only caught the back of our pocket. So now we want to bag our pocket. So to do that, you're going to basically like fold up the trousers into a little trouser parcel. You want to fold it up basically so it kind of sits in the upper part of the pocket, because what you're going to do is we're going to sew the pocket bag like this, right side against right side, and we want the trousers to be out of the way. But if this feels difficult, if your fabric is quite bulky, you don't have to fit it all in. All you have to do is to get the trousers out of the way so you can sew the sides, okay? So now I've got the trousers sticking out on one side, and I'm going to sew one side of the pocket. And once I've done that, I will just shift the excess, you know, at the top here, and do the other side. Okay, so now I can do the other side. So again, as long as I get the trousers out of the way, I'm good. So I'm just folding this back, and then I'm going to sew these two together. Okay, so I'm going to bring it to the machine this way. It's just a bit easier for me. I've just flipped it over. So our next step is going to be to turn the pocket the right way up and then sew those raw edges in. So it's like a French seam. So with that in mind, I'm just going to give it a little trim. You can see my fabric frays a lot. So I just want to give it a clean edge. And now we're going to turn the work. So all I've got to do is to just turn the pocket the other way. Very good. So you can see we are so nearly there, because now all we've got to do is to sew the side of the pockets on their own again, you know, no trousers involved. It's just to enclose the raw edge, okay? So when you put your hand in your pocket, you haven't got a raw edge exposed. So it'll just make your pocket last a bit longer, much longer. You haven't gone through all that trouble for it to just last a little long. Anyway, when you do something like that, you don't want to go ahead and just press and sew. What you want to do is roll the seam out. So at the ironing board, let me just poke that little corner out. I'm doing this carefully because I'm using some scissors. But basically what I do is I just roll the seam out, and that really what that does is that it pushes the raw edge as far into the seam as possible. So when I do my actual sewing, I know that I'm not letting the raw edge stick out. Okay, so go and do that with an iron to hand and get it all pressed and ready, and then we'll get it sewing. So now I'm all pressed. I'm going to be sewing the pocket seams again, but I'm not catching the trousers, okay? So I'm just going to flip back the trousers. Ta-da! Very good. So we have one more step, which is to go and top stitch the rest of our pocket, okay? So what that does, we left that top stitch right until the end because we want to top stitch it down and then close what we've got here, okay, which is a raw edge, and that's the pocket bearer, the pocket facing. So by top stitching it down, we are closing the upper pocket, which is not very useful. Okay, and then once you've done that, you can also go ahead and put maybe like a basting stitch at the top, so when you are sewing your rest of the trousers, it's all nice and holding. So I'm just going to do straight, 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 but if you wanted, if your machine is up for it, you could have a little bar tack here, for example. That's another option, but yeah, that's it really. And just to be clear, this time we are going to catch all the layers, so your stitching will come through on the back only as a top stitch line. So I'm pretty much done. All I've got to do left now will be to put a little button here and open my buttonhole so I can keep my pocket nice and close. So it stops it from like gaping. I'm pretty pleased. I mean, it's a little bulky with this fabric. It's like a cotton twill, kind of denim weight. And it's definitely felt a little heavy on the sides here. So the top stitching is a little sinks in a little bit, but you know what, I'm gonna give myself a break. I'm happy. I think this overall will work really well. Oh, and on the back, what I've got is, well, I kept the bobbin thread white. So yeah, and because our pocket is at a slight angle, it just crosses the stitching, but nothing abnormal in this case, in this particular case. So I hope you give this a go, and if you have any questions, just let me know. I'll be happy to help you. And you know, if you find any other thing that helps as well, let me know, because it's not black and white. There's not a right and a wrong method, and I'm sure other people have loads of other little tips that helps. I guess for me, one of the things that I will be looking at is when I tried it with like a lighter fabric, I got a super neat result on the side especially. I think it's just a matter of practice a little bit. But yeah, overall, I think it's going to work really well. All right.